Reverend John Joseph Bauer, United States Army, Vietnam. Reverend Bauer served as an Army chaplain in Vietnam in 1970 and 71. He actually went into the military on Veterans Day 1969, and the rest is history, folks. He has a great story of what he did in Vietnam, and he retired as a lieutenant colonel of the United States Army chaplain, and also was the chaplain for the baseball team, the Baltimore Orioles, so had a wonderful life. He was a priest for over 60 years, almost 64 years, and I met him in Abingdon, Maryland, September 13th, 2007. It's been a number of years ago. He passed away in 2019, so he's one of my unsung heroes. I've always been intrigued with the spiritual side of combat, and Father Bauer, Reverend Bauer, gives us a glimpse of what it was like as I ask him questions, as you will hear me ask questions along these lines. I want to thank Timothy McIntyre for sponsoring this story. Timothy, God bless you. You're such a support to my work. You've really inspired me. Your words are very heartwarming and encouraging. I just want to thank you for your support of my work and our veterans and your passion to get these stories out there like I have. So, Tim, I just salute you, sir. Look into this camera and say thank you and God bless you. Okay, folks, that's what we've got going today. So, Voices of History Radio is on the air 24/7. You can download the apps for free. You can access that through my website, larrycapeto.com. If you would like to sponsor one of these stories like Tim has done, I would encourage you to do so. There's information in the video description in this video. And on my website, there's a link that says Sponsor a Vet. You click on that, you see pictures of my veterans. A lot of you are starting to catch the vision, as it were, and help with this. Like I said, I don't monetize these videos. There's a lot of labor, a lot of work that goes into this. And your help is greatly appreciated. If you'd like to donate to my work, there's information in the comment section. And for those of you that have done these things recently, donated and sponsored, thank you. God bless you from my heart. Amen. Okay, folks. Reverend John Joseph Bauer. Hope I didn't forget anything here. He said Mass in Vietnam to the soldiers, the troops, before they went in the battle of the 4th Division, Infantry Division, and he said Mass in the highlands, the jungles, in the highlands in Vietnam, and just an incredible story, an incredible man, and I hope we can honor him in his memory today as we watch this story. So, thank you again for subscribing and sharing these videos, and my heart's full today, as it always is. So, God bless you. Thank you. Father, how did you get involved in the military? Did you go in the military, or what happened?
No, I was in Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic for 12 years as a missionary. And during the time in Puerto Rico, I was saying Mass from January to March on these Navy ships. They come in, they would have a thing called Operation Springboard. And I was interested in that. Every, the tender would go out, and the new one would come in. I said Mass on the largest ship they had at the time, a cruiser, and on one of the what do you call it, the helicopter aircraft carriers. I did that every Sunday, and I was saying Mass out at the allegedly Navy base, but it's really Army, Navy, Marines, and FBI. And then in '68, I decided I'd like to volunteer to go in the Army, and my superior said, you're too important down here. So I used an old thing when I finally went in '69. We had a priest who was working in the VA hospital, and he was in the room below me. He died, and I did two things, made two phone calls, one for the doctor to declare him dead, and the other one to get a priest to take his place. So I used that argument. And if I died, you'd have somebody immediately to take my place. I said, okay, go in. So I was sworn in, of all things, I was 41, ready to turn 42 in December. And November the 11th, I was sworn in Puerto Rico, and then flew up to Columbia, South Carolina, Fort Jackson.
Now you were a priest at the time.
I was a priest the whole time, yeah.
So you go. What's like your MOS? Are you a chaplain? Or?
Chaplain. Okay. So I was sent to. I went in from Puerto Rico. I had to report in. I go to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, on the 12th of November, and then January the 2nd, they sent me to chaplain school, which was in New York at the end of the Verrazano Bridge.
Now, U.S. So you're the U.S. Army then?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Now, how old were you? Did you say at the time?
I was 42.
Okay, what year was this?
When I turned 1969.
Now, at that time, did you want to go to Vietnam? I mean, what were your thoughts?
That was the purpose. That was my sneaky purpose. I'll tell you, when I went away to the seminary, I was only 14. That was the Second World War, 1942. And we followed the war from inside the seminary, on the maps and all this with little pins and whatnot. So I was very interested even then in what our country was doing. So then I was in the down here in Ilchester, Maryland, for our novitiate when the Korean War started. And an odd story, a priest came in who was an Air Force, he had been an Air Force chaplain. As a matter of fact, he was the chaplain for the Air Force Academy. So he came in, he was talking to us, and he said, but our planes were up. And one of our guys raised his hand like this, we were cut off from the world in the mission. He said, what do you mean? And he laughed. He said, you don't know we're at war? We didn't know we were at war, Korean War. So I missed that one too. Yeah. So then I had my chance here. So
how old are you now?
I'm 79. I'll turn 80 in December.
You look good.
Well, I'm kind of active. I need to lose this though.
Yeah. Let's kind of get into Vietnam now.
Okay.
You arriving in country?
I arrived in country on the 28th of August, which in my life has been a kind of an outstanding date. Every year we went to the seminary out of Baltimore, it was the 28th of August. And now I arrive in Vietnam on the 28th. And went in and, they told you about to protect your savings, your money, whatever it is. So I slept the first night with my hand under the pillow with my money like this. First time I took a shower, my uniform, I could see it. Somebody stole my money right out of there. So that was my first night. But then we had a little thing set up by the priest it was a little restaurant for the soldiers called the Roman Collar. So we were allowed to go over there and have, of all things, a steak and potatoes. So that was my introduction. And then he kept waiting and waiting for your name to come up. He had a big list of names, and they would cross out a number of names who were going on the next flight. So you keep getting up and looking, and finally around 2:30 in the morning you see your name is there. Get on the chopper, and he took me up to a place called An Khê, which is 4th Division. And so I was very active. Only once, like Sunday and Wednesday, the commander gave us his helicopter. But I was out on the road all the time with a Jeep on that famous place called the An Khê Pass and the Mang Yang Pass.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, when they were going home, they left in December. I got there in August, they left in December. He said, there should be a medal for a priest that travels like you do in a Jeep. There's no Jeep medal. So anyway, I ministered to them, and there were some write-ups in the Pacific Stars and Stripes, which was thrown out also into the dumpster. They would get very poetic. They would say I was saying Mass under the bridge or on the bridge as an altar with the stars as my candles and all this. They wrote all that up in there. But I would go out and I'd greet the guys that were under the bridge. They might be playing cards or whatever, but I just go under there with them, or go places like the fire bases by Jeep to say Mass, to memorials, have memorials. And then into the field.
Well, I'm going to back up just a second here. I was fortunate several years ago to interview a 91-year-old Catholic priest who was a chaplain on Iwo Jima.
Uh-huh.
And Father Bradley, he's from Long Branch, New Jersey. Wonderful man, patriot. He's since passed away. But anyways, he told me some amazing stories of combat and you know, you can imagine on Iwo Jima. But so that kind of sparked an interest in me, and having been brought up Catholic, you know, just it's a spiritual side of war. Tell me about, you know, your interaction with these young men, what their thoughts were about God, and just when they got into combat, before, after, and then if you minister last rites to them. Give me the spiritual side of combat.
Well, let's take what you saw last night, the famous thing's called the dust-off. They might call me 3 in the morning down to this little, whatever they would call a little tiny clinic, and they bring these 3 or 4 or 5 guys in. I'd go down and give them the sacraments, what we call now the sacrament of the sick, anoint them, and you'd see some weren't going to make it, and the others, they're going to amputate a leg because the thing was bending both ways. They'd patch it up and they would send them down. I was called frequently there. Then going out, talking to them was important. Talking, not necessarily about religion, just being present for them. And then they would get me aside. Some asked for classes. I gave classes and wanted to be Catholic. I hate to say it like this, but I felt like Jesus at times, sitting on the hillside. I was in a fire base sitting at the top, just a guy and myself sitting at the very top, all the other guys down below, and this guy's taking classes. I had a commander do the same thing. And I felt in that case too, he would only see me at night, in the pitch dark practically, go in to his hooch and give him classes. And even that, it was like, what do you call it, coming at nighttime to take classes from our Lord. He said, let you be baptized again and whatnot. So I felt like that, like this guy was sneaking over at night so nobody would see that this fellow was doing that. But he was taking classes too. He said his wife was Catholic. He wanted to be a Catholic when he got home. So these were various ways. Now, when I got with the 196, there I flew every day. Flew in the morning, in the evening, until it got dark. And I'd tell the pilot, I didn't want to put him in danger. I'd say, let's go home. Easter, 5 masses. We had one of our Protestant chaplains shot out of the sky and killed on the Easter day. But you'd show up, they were glad to see you. I mean, and fire bases. I would go, I know with another priest that was in the engineers, he'd say, well, I'm going to that base, so how about covering this other one for me? So there was no sense saying 2 to the same fire base. So you go out and say Mass, and to be honest with you, a lot of guys that just didn't take advantage of the service. We go to one of these places, for example, we had a fire base, a saddle type. And they would hang, I'll be up on this side, go over the whole place, tell them it's going to be Mass. And it was sad because they had this golden opportunity and they didn't take advantage where others did. And then on that same fire base, there was one, I don't know if you heard of it, Marianne. We lost 32 guys in a raid. I was on there and they took me off. It was raining and I was there. A chopper came in and took me off, or I would have been in on that. I have to be honest, I was taken off that base that night. The next day I was out there, and they filled 35 bags with parts of guys. They only lost about 12 guys, the enemy. But they blew away like 105s and 155s. They just did all that damage. And one of the sad things I noticed, they had the Vietnamese friendlies. They put them on one side, which was a sheer cliff. So they figured nobody could get them or they couldn't do anything. The enemy must have been on that fire base investigating it a number of times without being seen. Because they came in, they knew where the command post was. They blew that. And they blew so many of these guys away. But then I saw these guys, supposed to be our friends, walking around with these type of sandbag, and you could see the heels of boots that they were going into the hooches of the American soldier, taking their boots and things like that. And that bothered me. But maybe they were so needy. I don't know. I don't want to make a judgment on them. But that was a very sad situation. See, we were going to move off Marianne to another base, another post, and it was so dangerous. They moved back onto Marianne because it was a saddle type thing, supposed to be safer. So those are some of the things. Like, and flying around, as I say, every morning and every night. As soon as I got into 196, the commander said to me, "Father, you automatically have a seat on my chopper." I didn't go with him too often because a lot of times he was going to a place in the afternoon I already covered in the morning. So I wanted to go to some new place. And I can't say enough about these chopper pilots. Father will get you there. Now, they were clowns. I used to kid them. I said, "I'm getting my feet wet." They would go so low over the paddies. I said, "I get my feet wet out here." And they said, "We'll get you there." And they would get me out there, masses during the week or Sundays, the whole week, flying around. I had never seen these guys so good. You're talking about 20-year-olds, 21. They would head, you'd be looking, they'd be head for a tree, and they would whoop, whoop right around it. And one of my guys that I was always worried about being killed, he was killed, not with me on the plane. He went to a fire base that I had been on, and he brought a commander out to another one only 5 minutes away. He said, "Well, I might as well go over and see my buddies over at this other one." He never came back. And so the commander was waiting for his chopper. And when they found him, his chopper was flat. The skids were flattened. And around the plane were all these women with American bandoliers. Some were beheaded, some were because they moved in, and the blades just cut them apart. But this guy went down fighting, and they had another soldier in the back who was going to go home and get married. He hadn't been up for a long time. He decided, "I'm going to go up one more time." So he was also injured and then died. So that was a very sad thing. The fellow was only 21 years old. I had his name, that was thrown out. These names were all thrown out in a dumpster, see? So I want to go down to that wall and look for some of these guys. But all my little cards that I had little things on, it was very personal. And they're thrown away. And then when I first got, by the way, the 4th Division, they had a very sad thing. There was a helicopter that crashed, shot down, and the commander sent these guys up. They knew these fellows were dead. He sent them up the hill. And one of the most, unbelievable charitable person, he'd go out, volunteer to go out and look for mines on the road. I got his picture. And then it's in a magazine. And then he went up there and was killed. And when they brought these bodies down, they were all burned to a crisp. And he was also blown away. And we got a letter from his mother and father through the Red Cross. And they said, "We know how he was fighting against communism." See, the parents believed that. They believed it with all their heart. Another case when we had got this letter, right after I got a letter saying, my brother, the sergeant was crying, gave me the letter. Said, "Could you tell me how my brother's doing? He's not answering our letter. We sent him a box and he didn't acknowledge it." The brother had just been killed that day. It was one of those, what they call, they were in these tanks, and the enemy set up one of these, I don't know I forget what you call them. They wire them all, and all of them go up at one time. There's a name for that, I can't think of it. And so he was blown away in that too. And so it's sad. I was reading that letter and see me crying. The family waiting. And then the sergeant had to write the letter, answer him, that say, "The box came, but your brother didn't see it." So those are see, you don't get a chance to talk. I don't talk to the priest about this. I'm sitting now, there's only 2 of us left in that big rectory down at Sacred Heart. He doesn't know anything about the service, He's 70, he's never served. So who's he going to talk to? And a lot of times you have people come in, they're so they're anti-war and all this, these politicians too. He knows where I stand when these politicians are always doing what they're, like the thing they did to this general. That upset me, so he knows that. Anyway, this seems to be the end-all, be-all. Flying was most of the time, administering to them, saying Mass. And there were times when the danger, you couldn't say Mass. But I said, I brag about this. I said Mass on the smallest altar in the world. The little ammunition box, it's about that long, about that high. I had a chalice, ciborium, and we were kneeling down in the grass there. And I think I might have a picture of that. It might have been Easter, and I'm saying Mass there, and we're all huddled together, and I felt pretty this little ammunition box as an altar. And then that day I gave them communion under both forms. I said, why did I do that? I had two chalices that went around like this to the group, and when they got to the leaves, one guy the other guy they each had the chalice, not knowing what to do. So they broke out in a big smile. So I still remember that, how they attended Mass in the elephant grass there.
Just give me some more. What I'm trying to get to is just the personal side, the one-on-one interaction you had with, maybe there's a story or a few stories that come to mind where somebody was wounded or gravely wounded or somebody was dying, and maybe if you remember any conversation.
I remember a conversation at that Mary Ann when I went down to the clinic or whatever they had there, and we went down. This guy had his bottom part of his legs blown off, and I'm talking to him, and the morale of that kid was so great, it put you to shame. He said to me, he was from Ohio, and I said, what are you, he says, Father, I'm going to go home, I'm going to get married. He had it all planned. That didn't bother him at all. I'm looking down at the no feet. And he's saying, I'm going back and get married. He had it all set, so that was very personal. And then other things, I go in, and I look down and I see the dog tags, you have a dog tag there. And I look down and I see, all of a sudden they consider themselves a Buddhist. I knew these kids didn't know what a Buddhist was. And I'm trying to say to them, your dog tags are going to, when you need a priest or a Protestant chaplain, they're not going to be there because you're saying you're a Buddhist. They said, well, it was like fashionable. So those things were personal. And then going out under the bridge, talking to them, they're playing cards. I could kibitz a little bit with them. And then in the evening, some of the guys were playing cards, and I just watched them. And then I moved in one night and started playing, and I started winning, but I got my shirt taken from me. These guys are pros. And then the other thing was the crowds that we had pretty good crowds for Mass, like the Sunday Mass before going out to the field. They would have, maybe Saturday night, they'd bring in these bands, and they were pathetic, some of them. They were like Filipino. They were trying to sing in English and whatnot. So one time I had a real big crowd. I'll tell you why. Very personal thing here. These guys were singing, but there was a girl. She must have been Australian. Tall, blonde girl. She asked me what time Mass was. She was at Mass. I had people that never came to church. They were all in there. They were all in there to see this girl in there. It wasn't to see me. But there was this blonde in there. Oh, they crowded in. Officers and all were in that Mass. I said, boy, I haven't seen any of you guys before. But so you see attractions bring guys together. So that's another personal thing.
Well, when you're with somebody who's dying, I mean, are you rehearsing what you do? Do you just talk from your heart?
No, it's all different. Every case is different. Even when I have to give out of the Vietnam situation, when somebody calls and says I have a death in the family, somebody wanted to sit in with me, see how I do it, and I said, the guy came, left the room, I took the kid outside and walked up and down the hallway. Sometimes it's the person who's not sick in the family that dies. He's got a mother who's very sick, it doesn't. Now in Vietnam, I'll bring that one. There were cases like that. I had to talk to them, get a letter where they want him to come home. And the father already died, so here he is in this great situation in Vietnam, and you're giving this bad news. And the way you handle it, sometimes a kid says to you, I know what it is. He would tell me, or he'd be very cool. It wouldn't affect him at all. If you do it, you can't go by the book, say, well, I'm going to talk to him. Everyone, maybe it's just walking him up and down a little bit, talking a little bit, but before you break it. Then in other cases, I hit him hard, but say it right away. And that's been the most effective. You would think that would never work.
So what do you mean you hit him hard? What do you
Well,
say
I mean,
to them?
I would come up to him and I wouldn't beat around the bush. I'd almost tell him the bad news right away. I don't know why I did it that way, but it worked out very well. So maybe the fellow was expecting it. So, when you're waiting too long, and he can kind of read into why the chaplain's called. Like the fellow was out here just now, he told me when the priest came around, he said, I'm not ready to die yet. See, some people have that idea. If a priest is called, you're on your way out. So, that's a very personal thing, too, in Vietnam. I had that. Also, some sad things, though, they get these letters from their wife who say, Dear John. And that happened frequently. That happened too often than it should be. They would send these letters. The guy was brokenhearted. Talk about death. This was probably in some cases worse. And before I left for Vietnam, and before Jackson, we had a terrific thing called, there were talks about patriotism, about marriage, character guidance it was called. One of the best things the chaplains had. They gave that up. But on the marriage thing, I was trying to talk them out of marriage before going to Vietnam. And it turned out that I was correct. So when you meet the ones that got married just before leaving, and then you get this letter that, or they meet somebody else and they're goodbye. Married maybe a month or less, and this poor guy, he's just thrown away. And now you got him in a situation where he's going into battle with this broken marriage. That doesn't sit too well, but the combination doesn't work. So he's not even paying attention to anything. That comes down to he's not paying attention about protecting the other guy or himself. So he's so brokenhearted. So those are some of the personal things that I had.
Can I ask what you say to somebody who's mortally wounded?
Well, most of my cases were, I really didn't have a lot to say. They were usually working on them, and I'd step in and anoint them.
Can you give me an example of a situation where you were, what happened, and then take me into the dialogue that you would have with this person?
Well, the dust off, you had doctors and all there too, see, and nurses. So it wasn't anything I could say hardly privately or with them, except as they were putting them on the chopper. I had that where they tried to kick me off the chopper because I was running out to the chopper to take care of this guy that was flying down. I wanted to anoint him first. And he wanted to be in it, so that was very personal. It wasn't much of a conversation, except the guys who were trying to kick me off, and I just told them to hold on while I took care of the soldier. That was, a wounded soldier, probably died on the way down, but I made sure I got there to give him the sacraments.
Well, what's the last rites? When they say last rites, what do you say?
I say we don't call them last rites anymore. The sacrament is sick, because people think once the last rites they're gone. Well, we have a special prayer. We anoint with oil, and so we say the prayer, anoint them, and give them a short. If they're dying, we don't give a long prayer.
Can I ask what the prayer is, though, what you actually say, or?
Well, it's a very short prayer about through this holy anointing, through the Holy Spirit, may you receive the gift of health, and then the last part would be more or less, may you have, a resurrection with Christ. So that's the gist of the prayer. So even now, I go to VA hospitals and whatnot yet. So.
But if somebody, at times I'm sure people would call for a priest, but if somebody wanted salvation or whatever, what would you pray with them?
Oh yeah, well, the main difference was Catholic or Protestant. Like when I worked in the hospital in El Paso, I was the only priest, 12 stories, And you'd be amazed. I covered everybody, Jew, Catholic, and if I hit them with a good little thing and made it funny for them, I used that all through the whole 12 story of the hospital. And you go in, and there'll be 4 people maybe to some rooms. They say, "What about me over here?" And I look down, and it would say Baptist. Well, I'm not going to give them communion. But you find out the person's a Catholic. The husband was Baptist who brought him into the hospital, so he gives his religion. Yeah. So anyway, that's the thing we do. We're called, and we talk to them, pray with them, console them after a death too. Like the family members, the soldiers. I mean, they're out in Vietnam when they lost guys. You try to you were asking about the wounded. Well, you're talking to the living here. You're taking care of them. And then the memorials I had. They were out in no man's land. I would take one of these big, I don't know what you call those, big square batteries, a little radio, little rinky-dink thing recorder, and I'd wire the thing up, and I'd play we have the national anthem, and we had everything right out there for the memorial, everything you would have and it had the, what do you call it, the taps on there. And we're out in no man's land. But you're able to see the soldiers want to take care of want to have this memorial. So that too is very personal. It's not always the person you're talking to that's dying, but as I say, it's a living person that you're really supporting. Otherwise, Another thing I was in with I don't know if you want to hear this, but we had a thing called the Untouchables. There was a Major O'Brien, I mean. He formed this. He made me part of this. And what that was, to go around and get the drugs off the guys. He'd make guys keep your hands in your pocket, and they would take the drugs out, have to crawl under hooches. But when they had a raid, he eliminated me. But when it was time for me to say Mass, I was the only one allowed off that base. I went out, said Mass here, and then I had to go up to another one in a Jeep, then come back, the only one allowed in, because there was going to be a big raid on this big White House, the center of the drugs. And the politicians said, "You can't do that. That's a no-fire zone." See, this happened all the time, no-fire zone. Our troops, when we went down to, back into the Central Highlands, had a whole division, North Vietnamese crack division. We're like little children. They could say, "Hey, you can't touch us." Our guys were all there, couldn't fire a shot because they said no fire zone. That's the kind of thing that gets to you. If they're doing it now, same thing. What we saw in Vietnam, it's a repeat.
So again, now I'm still talking here. If I was wounded on the battlefield, I mean, did you encounter situations where I would I'd want a priest, I probably knew I was dying, and then you come to him, and then there's a prayer of some sort, and then did you have people die? Did you have people die right there?
Yeah, when they in the dust-offs and things like that, yeah. And you anoint the person, you pray, and give them the short prayer. You don't give them a long dissertation. And you anoint them, and if it's a Protestant, you pray with them. Same thing. They want a priest, no matter what faith. I'm just going to be very honest. In the military, the priests are accepted by just everybody. There's something about this magnet called priest that people want, and so that I had, you have as many Protestant guys asking for you, and it's just one of these things. Like over here in Aberdeen, I mean, I didn't have any difficulties or anything with anybody, because if you make yourself available, if you are a priest and really care, sure, then people really want you. They see you're genuine. That's what I try, without trying, just try to be a priest.
Can you tell me, Father, how men die in combat? Do they die peacefully? Is it violently? How do they die?
They usually, the ones I saw, you see the life draining out of them, turning very white, and they're kind of in the cases I saw, there wasn't anything violent. There was more or less quiet. getting cared for, and then they just fade away. I was called out when these fellows were already dead. When I went out to they put out the booby traps themselves. They put it out. They walked back through the thing, walked back through the road, and were killed. I went down, and I can't get this out of my head. There was this one fellow lying there. They had his hand was missing here. They had a bag, plastic bag over the hand. Well, this hand was, they had taken his wedding ring off. They had it sticking up, his finger was like this. He had the wedding ring right on his finger. They reserved that for I guess for his wife when they sent the body home. But I saw that. So all 6 of these guys killed by themselves by making a mistake. And over the sergeants would tell these guys what to do. One mistake, and they just don't listen. Sometimes it's just an error, and the other times they just want to know better. Like pulling a stick out of the ground. They're told not to pull anything out of the ground.
Did you talk to men before they went into combat?
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
what type of things were you saying? What type of questions were they asking you?
Well, most of the time they wanted to have a religious service. That was the big thing, and you know guys acted very normal. Like if you were in church, these guys were. Some of the pictures I got, they're no great thing, but you could see the attentiveness of the. On a tank, they're up there listening. I'm out, and they're all gathered around. You can see by where their head they are, but they're very devotional. The ones who came to the service, and when you say in the battle, these guys were always in battle because their tanks. I got pictures of that when they're. It's almost like the old West. There, they have the tanks in a circle, like or they're fixing them. That's another thing. They're putting the what do you call it? So they either jump the whatever you call the. My mind's not working here.
The track?
The track. They're fixing it, and you know it's hot. They're stripped, and I come there and they have a service, and they're very attentive. That's what I say. That's the kind of thing. We're going out. I went up, and a lot of times just talking. I was talking for a long time with this one kid. He had been out already. The commander wanted to send this group out, and it was a nonsensical thing. And I still remember this. I talked to this kid, and he was killed. Not because I talked to him, but when he got off the chopper, came right down on a booby trap. Just split him right in half. But I remember talking to him at length. And likable young kid. I mean, he just, no complaints, not complaining about being sent out again. He's just going out because he's sent. Those are the kind of things that I run into most of the time, things like that. You go down to the group and you walk around and you talk to them before, and they all got all their stuff ready. And in this particular case, the fact that I can still remember it so well, that I was talking to this one, because he said, I just came back. And I said, well, but I'm going out. He didn't have any, as I say, no complaints, no gripe. Now we had sad cases where guys were going to go home. One case I remember very well, he says, I'm going to blow my mind one more time. Took an overdose. He only had a half a day to go, going home. We had another one, did the same thing, came in, and he went into his hooch. Well, the guys were fooling around, throwing these grenades around, what do you call it, a smoke grenade, and his guy vomited on his own, and he's dead. So those are things that didn't need to take place. Names are on that wall that guys did dumb things, really. But the thing is, they were there because of the war. I don't know, you can't get into somebody's head. They're using drugs and whatnot. So easy to get.
What about those that lost somebody in country? What would you say to them? They lost their buddies or friends and they need someone to talk to. What would you say to them?
Gee, for me to just think of something that would be difficult. I mean, as I say, just like I treat people when there's a death, every case is different. Every case, you see how they're taking it. And sometimes guys don't show any kind of emotions, and you know they're hurting inside. All you can go over, a lot of times it's not just talk religion. See, I learned a lesson. I could talk sports to them, do anything. If that breaks them down. When I visit the sick, even now, if I know that a guy knows all about cars, I know nothing about it, I go in, let him talk to me all about these cars. And then I say to him, you want to go to confession? A case in El Paso where the wife says, he's not going, he's been away for 35 years, he'll never go. I went in, he talked about cars, helped him with his confession, came out and the woman said, see, I told you. I said, you told me what? He went to confession. See, the same thing in Vietnam. You talk about things that guys have an interest in. And when you sit around eating or something like that, there's a lot of chances. I did things that soldiers didn't know I did, some of the pilots. I had a guy grounded. Because he wanted to kill. He came back on a Sunday bragging about the fact that he flew down over the water and there was a sinking little boat with 2 people hanging on. When I came back, he said they were gone. It was great enjoyment. He could kill animals. I was with him a lot of times in one of his little observations. They just, me with my masked kid here and him. And he went around with a big bowling, big knife hanging down. And I said, this guy needs a rest. So I told the commander, he grounded him. Now I'm sitting at the table with him. There's a little square table. He said, I like to find the son of a bitch. And I said, here I am. I didn't tell him that, but I said, here I am, and to myself. And I was saying to myself, what would he would do to me if he found out it was for his own good and for good of other people? And it was only temporary. He was back up in the air. The one that was killed, he was temporarily grounded, not for anything bad, but because in another instant, if your plane landed, you had to abandon it. You're supposed to take the machine gun out of there, and he lost his. So he was grounded for a while. Gee, what good guys, these guys, pilots.
What other stories, Father, come to mind as far as ministering to the wounded? How long were you over there?
A whole year.
So, I'm sure you weren't doing it every day, maybe, but I mean, were you actually in harm's way a lot of the times when you were doing your work?
Mostly flying. Yeah. I mean, we were shot at when I was.
When you were flying with the troops going in, were they looking to you for comfort?
Oh yeah.
In what way? How were they?
Well, one of the things, the fact is that you were there, gave them the priest. If they're there when their chaplain is with them, they feel a whole lot better that he's one of us. That's what I read into this. I had in this one unit, there was a black commander. I don't think he ever lost anybody. Every place we went, they had to dig holes. They dug in, and then after he finished, he said, well, 15 minutes, we're leaving. He left more holes in Vietnam and never lost a guy that I know of. And I always wondered who that black captain was. I always thought he might be connected to eventually the general. But he just was smart. He moved them. And that was the thing in Vietnam. You didn't stay in the same place too long because the enemy was always watching. This, I got myself off the...
Well, I was asking you about looking to you for comfort, going on the helicopters, going into battle. You said just the fact that you're there. Because it's too loud to be talking going in, isn't it? I mean, you can't really be talking.
No, but when you get there, you're in between the brush with them. And again, the ones that are closer to you, you're talking to. And then the fire bases I went to, there's where you went up and down the fire bases, because these guys are being delivered into there. And some of the fire bases are not exactly with a Hilton Hotel. And so, that's where I just walk around talking to them individually, or if there were 3 or 4 of them together, you stop and talk to all of them. It may be something that you hit on that they're really happy about, and that's the way I worked. I just try to be upbeat. Yeah. And it seemed to work. Some of them gravitate to you. Here's something very personal. When I got over there, I arrived in August. But my memory was good that in May, there was that big takeover in Washington. Remember all the protests about the invasion of Cambodia? They were turning over cars on the bridges going into Washington and whatnot. So I would sit with a couple, every time I sat with the guys, I asked them this question. When I found out they went in, I said, what'd you think of going into Cambodia? It was like somebody wrote the script. They said to me, didn't want to go. We found a lot of ammunition and rice, but I'm glad I went. Every one of them said the same thing, those 3 lines. Didn't want to go, we found all this, I was glad I went. And I said, I was just asking that question to show me that here are young guys who are completely different than these protesters that are taking over the Capitol. But that's the kind of soldiers we had, that they were willing to go into battle. As I say, I was fairly new when I was asking these questions, because that happened around May or so, and I'm over there in August, and I'm asking these questions probably in September, sitting on the fire base.
Have, gosh, we're kind of getting a little short on time.
And I didn't tell you anything about what I do with the guys who are dying, much.
Well, it's just intriguing because I've heard stories with the corpsmen, the medics,
Yeah.
the one Catholic chaplain I referred to, but I haven't found many people like yourself. So I guess I'm kind of curious myself as to, what's said, what's done. I mean, in a moment of life and then death and passing, I mean, I'm sure it didn't become routine, but I'm trying just to pick your brain.
Well, in some cases,
as to what these men were saying to you.
Well, in some cases, they're not saying anything. They're just dying. In other cases, they're just, suffering, really. That's what it is. They're either groaning or moaning, whatever. They really didn't have much to say. They didn't say, like you see in the movies, tell my mother, or you got a cigarette or something like that. Nobody ever said that to me. Nobody ever said, give my mother a message or my wife or anything like that when they were in that position. And then again, I knew when to move back, even in the hospital when I came back. I know, me in the emergency room, operating room, I know when to move back. And the doctors knew, let me come in, take my thing, and so they can take care. And that's what I did there too. I did it because if you try to be gung-ho religious, you can do more damage than not. I mean, I'm talking about a religious thing, but the medics and all, they have life and death thing here. So I would never force my way in ahead of that they couldn't do their work. Do it all together and then move back while they're doing their...
How many men do you think you saw die on the battlefield? Now, you talked about the dust offs after they were evacuated. Yeah. Were you actually on the scene in a
I wouldn't have been, no, not with those dust offs, no. I was...
so it wasn't like there's shooting going on, someone gets hit, they're down, and
no, it wasn't. Most of my stuff was flying into dangerous things. For example, after that Marianne thing, we were shot, I thought we were shot down when the plane just fell because somebody was shooting. But that's the way they do it. They avoid getting hit by dropping instead of going up slowly. So, I mean, it's scary. And then I'll give you a little thing about an interest item for you. We went out and we land, and they're rushing over, all the soldiers rushing to get onto the chopper, and they're carrying this body bag, a poncho. They put them on the plane. It's right down at my feet, the body bag. The guys are crying their eyes out. I look down, I see a paw sticking out. Our one-eyed dog. The dog lost its one eye when it went down. It was one of those ones that could pick out different mines and things. And this time he got killed. Well, they had a dog cemetery over there, had pictures of that too. We don't have them now. But they cried like it was a soldier because this dog had really protected them. But there it was, I see a paw. And I felt a little more relieved, even though it was something very precious to them. It wasn't a person. But there was the old paw sticking out of the poncho. Guys crying like it was a guy.
Do you think you've heard the phrase atheist in the foxhole? You think there's no atheists in Foxville?
I think there's stupidity, but I don't think there's an atheist. No, I don't think there would be. But I told you, I saw guys that had opportunities in all the world to go to services, Protestant, Catholic, whatever. Now I can remember also we had this guy who was sent to an R&R. I think he had a death wish. He came back he was always wanted to go out. He came back. He was killed, lieutenant. Went out with the guys. He should have been on R&R. And then here's this other thing we had, guys like children. So they're crowded around, and they're giving things away. Somebody dropped a grenade in. 5 guys or so killed. And I saw one of them never came to my service. He was a Puerto Rican, and I'm saying he had this little bandage around, whatever he had around, a colored ribbon around his head. But he was one of them was killed there too. I said, geez. But it's the chance that soldiers always take by being very charitable to young people, giving things away.
Well, what are your thoughts about life and death? You've seen a lot of death. You've talked to people, in a war situation and beyond. I mean,
I've seen a lot of death. Relatives, anointed my own father, anointed my own mother. My sister died. My brother-in-law, another brother-in-law. I have all these. I buried 19 people, 19 funerals I had in less than a month in which parish I'm in. But I've seen that over in Vietnam, seen it in that hospital, and a lot of emotions. People are full of emotions. You got to be able to control yourself, and it's difficult, especially after your mother and father die. You go privately, try to put up a front in front of your sister. I have 4 sisters. Try to put up a front, but when you're private, it's different. So death is never, I don't think it's ever too easy I think you suffer when you see how people take it, family, children. It's very difficult. Recently I buried, about a year ago, this retired Navy, and he had cancer, and I kept going to the hospital to take care of him. And then came the decision time. It was me to make a decision for him. I'm hoping he's making it. He says, you think I should go home or stay here? I think I'll go home and die at home. But he still had this idea he was going to live. He sat at the table at Christmas with his family. I buried him a couple of days after Christmas. But I felt so good about that he was able to sit there one more time at Christmas. His daughter just died a couple of weeks ago, and she was buried from here. So had that one. But I mean, death is all around. But some people die very peacefully. They go out very smoothly. Some have difficulty. But I learned a lesson. I do. You're looking at a guy who wanted to live to be 100. I saw my mother just go away. It was so peaceful. I said, no, why am I saying that's selfish? I want to live to be 100. No, I can take 89. I can take whatever God gives me. But see, that's what I mean by, you're right. I have seen one of the people that really, to this day, imprisoned me with her death. And that was this little 5-year-old girl with cystic fibrosis in William Beaumont Medical Center. That little girl had the whole hospital in the palm of her hand. Blonde hair, big blue eyes, and I would go around twice to her. And I mean, I even got to think she colored. Very smart. I was starting to train her for First Communion. And when she was dying, a Jewish doctor called me and said, Father, hurry over, give her communion. I got there, she was unconscious, I couldn't do it. They'd run her bed, the Lutheran doctor, the Jewish doctor, and the Catholic priest. That little girl took that hospital. They had changed the room, no nurses could go. I mean, that little girl I've been giving money to cystic fibrosis since 1972, because of that little girl.
Let me ask you a question. What would be your answer to, people are looking for reasons why things happen, in this case war, young men dying. I mean, how would you summarize the death, the casualties, those that came back home? How would you describe a combat, and then just why these young men were dying, and were they dying for their country, or were they just surviving?
I think most of them are heroes in the sense of dying for their country. Just like you heard those fellows last night. That wasn't put on. When you had the, there are some that were sent. They had no, back in Vietnam it was a draft. So some were sent. Some of them did not want to become officers because they didn't want to stay in longer than they had to. I had some of those college guys wanted to be just an ordinary private. But when all is said and done, they're there to, like they said last night, I wouldn't use the word job, duty. They did it duty, and then for their country. And there's another thing that brings them together. As an American, I think it's this athletic thing that you're going to a challenge, you're going to win. I think that's what it is. And so the people on the other end who lose a son or daughter, it's difficult. But I'm surprised how many are coming out now in this war when everybody is all of a sudden they were all for it, now they're against. How many wives and parents are accepting the death of their son because they think there's a cause. So I think the soldiers in Vietnam, I felt they thought they were fighting communism.
What would you say to a young man going into battle that is not sure of his destiny beyond the earth and was maybe afraid that he might die? And what would you say to him regarding eternity and what lies beyond if he was killed? How would you encourage him and then prepare him in the same sense if he was to die?
Well, I would prepare him to live. First of all, I'm trying to give him a balanced idea, but the other part of it is about what death is like. Like the mother had said in front of me with this daughter, it's like going into the next room, and that's true. Death is like going into the next room because you're beginning over perpetually. Like the man said, the woman said to this convert, the great writer for the newspaper, she said to him, he said, "Are you a Catholic?" She says, "No, I'm Orthodox." "Are you?" He says, "No, I'm a Jew." She said, "Life is short, but eternity is forever." That's a wake-up call. So you would approach that, I think, with a young person. It depends where they are. I don't get preachy.
Yeah, no.
I do not get preachy. I just talk to a person. And it's very difficult sometimes when it would be a person around another person dying and can't accept it. The dying person accepts it easier than it seems, than the family don't want to let them go. And here the troop, if talking to a soldier, I would give him hope of living, but in case, I would, give him a little bit of encouragement about eternity and about the sacraments, things that we got to offer. Prayer, I would try to tell him to be prayerful in his own words, because I'm awful on this idea that, not awful on it, it's a conversation. Prayer is a conversation. You don't always have to use Hail Mary, the Our Father. You can talk to our Lord, but then you have to listen. So that's what I try to tell people. So a person going like that, so he's out when he's got nights and he feels lonely. I got a lot of articles I wrote. I got one called The Lonely Soldier. Take you through Second World War, the Battle of the Bulge, take you all through Vietnam, and he's like, at each paragraph, he's saying where he is and being lonely. He's thinking of home, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then he's all alone at night, and he thinks about home. So I have articles. There are articles hanging up in the Aberdeen Proving Ground, I think, that I might have told you. They framed them, they're hanging up there where the soldiers come in. There's an article on soldiers. There's an article on a poem on Operation Gallant Eagle. I was surprised. I went in there the other day, and they're hanging up in this place where the soldiers come in. Got a spotlight on them. I said, well, there goes my, I'll be around for a little while yet. No, but that's how I talk with soldiers or anybody. I give them hope. It's not, it's nothing negative about saying, well, you're going to die. No, you prepare them for death, but you're preparing them to live, and then get on with that. I would never go in. If a person's dying of cancer, it might be somewhat different. But even there, the approach is not.
When you say you prepare them for life, you mean eternity?
Well, in the soldier, I'm preparing them to live a good life now, this life, so that eternity is the answer to a good life. That would be my approach to it. I'm giving them hope of survival. A soldier going into battle with survival, hope. And then if something should happen, I'll build up the other part of it about what's expected. If you're living a good life, these are rewards.
Did you ever encounter people that were concerned about taking somebody else's life, and what you would say to them?
No, I never. You mean in the battle?
The enemy, yeah.
No,
Okay.
no. But you heard what those guys said last night. It's hard to kill the first person.
Yeah.
You just hope you don't, like this person I told you about the flying. He got used to it. That's why I want him grounded. He was getting used to killing animals, firing on anything he saw, big animals, and then people. He was rejoicing when those people drowned, if they did drown.
You've already talked about it and been fairly descriptive, but again, just in a nutshell, how would you describe the moment of death on a battlefield?
Well, without the soldiers, I think the guys were reaching for somebody to be near him. Otherwise, he's abandoned. He would feel abandoned. That's why priests in the past have crawled out, given their own life crawling out, and priests have pulled guys in. You know, Vietnam, I don't know if you know this, the chaplain section, we had over 500 priests in Vietnam. But of all the chaplains, thousands of chaplains went into Vietnam, 3 got the Congressional Medal of Honor. All 3 were priests. 2 were killed and 1 of them survived. 3. One of them, they got him up there pushing it for sainthood. He was in the Marines. So 3 of them got the Medal of Honor.
Do you know what he was doing when he got that, a citation?
He was out trying to help guys, pull them back. He was wounded about 15 times, they say. His arm was, even when his arm was useless, he was still going out there. Ministering, and he was finally shot. The soldiers saw that. They were witnesses to his death.
Yeah.
So, that's what he was doing. I never had to do that. He was right there in that battle when the Marines were fighting.
Would you ever quote like the 23rd Psalm or anything like that?
No, I mean, I would probably say, go through the Our Father. I would get them, if they want to go to confession, I would give them absolution. I would do that. That'd be one of the most important things to them.
Did you ever cry?
Well, you saw me.
I mean, even with the wounded?
Oh, sure. Try not to show it, but sometimes that could be something good. You're showing feelings. The guy sees feelings. Yeah,
Did you ever feel helpless?
Sure you do. You feel like, what can I do more? You see life drifting away in a young guy. I would have told you I was 42 years old in Vietnam. And I'm saying, like that kid said, I spent 9 years in Germany. This kid, I went over with an ordinary field jacket with no rank. He said to me, Father, when are you getting a star? I swallowed. I was a captain. He thought, see, age. He was relating to me old. Wanted to know when I was getting a star. So.
What goes through your head when a young man dies in the battlefield?
I feel a loss. I really do. I feel loss. I also feel bad for the family, that now they're going to get this bad news. They don't know it yet. See, what I know, they don't know yet. And it's going to ricochet from mother and father, wife, children, whatever. Most of the guys were young, so they didn't have, not too many had children. At least not a big family. Officers, yes. But like those guys we lost on Marianne, I knew that one officer very well. He was taking classes. When they knew it was him. They found a finger with a ring on it. So, yeah, it's very personal. But you can't let it get to you. You got to go to the other guys, and the other guys, and the other guys. Otherwise, if you can't break. See, people have an idea about priests that they don't. They're different. We don't suffer. We don't. We're always upbeat. We're always. No, there are times when you're very. You have sad moments, and there would be one example of. And the guys are 18 and 19 years old, and even the ones that lost, they were still living but lost legs. When I'm at the ball field, as a royal chaplain, I really feel proud of these guys. They come in, the guy went and throws the first pitch out, he's got one leg. And even the ball players who think they make millions of dollars, they go out and talk to them. We have 4 or 5 of these guys. You know what they did? These guys are all wounded. They gave away a little brown bracelet to the ball players. Yeah, there's
I'm going to have you do one more thing. At the end of my interviews, I always ask the veteran to give me a salute into the camera from where you're seated.
Okay.
Can you do that for me when I tell you?
I can do it.
I want you to look right into the camera, sir, and give me a salute. Excellent.
Okay.